It was a crisp autumn morning in October 2022, in Maple Ridge, a small town nestled in upstate New York. The leaves were turning shades of red and gold, the air was cool and refreshing, and everything seemed peaceful. But for one family, that morning would mark the beginning of their worst nightmare. The body of 17-year-old Emily Carter was discovered in the woods behind her family's home, half covered in fallen leaves, as if someone had tried to hide the crime. It was a gruesome scene, and nothing about it seemed right. No one could have imagined something so horrific happening in a quiet town like Maple Ridge, where families lived in peace, trusting one another. The news spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the community. The once peaceful streets became filled with whispers of who could have committed such an unimaginable act. Detective James Carter, a seasoned investigator with the local police department, was called in to lead the case. He had seen many cases, but nothing like this. As the brother of the victim, James was not only deeply affected by the murder of his younger sister, but he also felt the weight of responsibility to uncover the truth. What made it even more difficult was the fact that his family, his mother Amanda, and their stepfather Daniel, were now all suspects in his mind. Was the killer someone from within their own home? As the investigation unfolded, James began to look into Emily's life, trying to understand who she was and what could have led to her untimely death. Emily had always been the bright, artistic one in the family. She had dreams of becoming a journalist and uncovering the truth. Her schoolwork was exceptional, and her teachers admired her insightful essays. She had a small group of friends and a passion for photography, often capturing the beauty of nature in the woods behind their house, the same woods that would ultimately be her grave. But her life wasn't as perfect as it appeared on the outside. Emily's relationship with her mother, Amanda, had always been strained. As a child, Emily was the center of Amanda's world, but after Amanda married Daniel, the dynamic shifted. Daniel was a successful businessman, and at first, Emily had welcomed the stability he brought to their home. But as she grew older, things began to change. There were constant arguments between Emily and Amanda, especially after Emily discovered a secret about Daniel, a secret that would tear their family apart. Emily had uncovered evidence of Daniel's affair with Isabella Martinez, a neighbor's wife. It wasn't just a brief fling. It was an ongoing relationship, one that Daniel had been hiding for months. Emily had confronted him about it, but he had managed to dismiss her concerns, pretending it wasn't true. The stress of living in a home filled with secrets and lies weighed heavily on Emily. She couldn't bring herself to tell her mother the truth, even though Amanda had always trusted her to be open and honest. Emily knew revealing Daniel's betrayal would destroy their family, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the truth needed to come out. As the investigation progressed, suspicion initially fell on Amanda. Their troubled relationship, the tension in the house, and the recent arguments between mother and daughter all seemed to point toward her. But as Detective Carter dug deeper, he began to question if the real killer was hiding in plain sight. Daniel, the seemingly perfect stepfather, was the picture of suburban success. A well-respected financial advisor, he had built a thriving practice and was known in the community as a generous, dependable man. He coached youth soccer, served on the local chamber of commerce, and always seemed to have his life together. But James began to notice something strange. Daniel's behavior had changed in the weeks leading up to Emily's murder. He had become distant, avoiding family gatherings, and his temper seemed to flare for no apparent reason. It was when James reviewed Emily's journal that he stumbled upon the breakthrough he needed. Emily had written about her discovery of Daniel's affair. She had even gone so far as to follow him one evening and saw him in a passionate embrace with Isabella. Emily had been torn. Should she confront Daniel? Should she tell Amanda? But Emily's thoughts were interrupted by a haunting realization: she was in danger. Someone wanted to keep the affair a secret at any cost, and it wasn't just Daniel who had something to lose. The investigation had taken a dark turn. As James pieced together the details of the affair, he began to realize that Emily had known more than anyone had initially suspected. Her death wasn't just a random act of violence. It was the tragic result of a family torn apart by betrayal and hidden truths. The first piece of the puzzle had been placed, but James knew that finding the truth wouldn't be easy. The closer he got to uncovering the secrets his family had hidden for years, the more dangerous things became. In the heart of the small town, behind the walls of the Carter family home, a killer was walking free, and James was determined to find out who it was before it was too late. Detective James Carter couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper he dug, the more tangled the web of his family's secrets became. The night of Emily's murder, when her lifeless body was found beneath the trees, was just the beginning. But as James ventured into his investigation, he began to uncover something even darker, something he had never imagined. As James continued to sift through the pieces of Emily's life, one thing became clear: her relationship with her mother, Amanda, had always been complex, filled with hidden resentment and unspoken words. For years, Amanda had been the center of Emily's world, but when Daniel entered the picture, everything changed. Emily had never fully accepted Daniel as her father figure. She had always felt a sense of abandonment, a distance between her and Amanda that grew wider with each passing day. James knew the toll that Daniel's presence had taken on the family. Amanda had seemed distant, caught up in her new marriage, and Emily had become withdrawn, losing the spark that once made her so vibrant. The once tight bond between mother and daughter had begun to fray, and James could feel the weight of their broken connection. But he never realized how far the rift had grown until he saw it firsthand. James dug into Amanda's personal belongings, hoping to uncover any clue that could shed light on what had happened to Emily. He discovered old journals, letters, and photographs that painted a picture of a woman struggling with guilt and regret. One letter, written just weeks before Emily's death, stood out to him. It was a letter from Amanda to her late mother, apologizing for the strain in their relationship and confessing that she felt like she had failed as a mother. The letter spoke of how she felt torn between her new life with Daniel and her love for Emily, who had become more distant by the day. Amanda blamed herself for not seeing the warning signs, for not being there for Emily when she needed her the most. But as James continued to read, another shocking discovery was made. Amanda had known about Daniel's affair with Isabella Martinez for months, perhaps even longer than Emily. The revelation hit James like a tidal wave. His own mother, the woman he had always trusted, had kept the most destructive secret of all from him. It wasn't just the affair that had caused the rift between Emily and Amanda, it was the betrayal of their trust, the hidden truth that no one had confronted. Emily had known, and Amanda had chosen to remain silent. James couldn't understand it. Why hadn't Amanda said anything? Why hadn't she protected Emily from the emotional toll of Daniel's deceit? It was as though Amanda had been living in a state of denial, hoping the problem would go away on its own. But denial, as James knew all too well, was never the answer. It was only a matter of time before the truth would explode, tearing everything apart. The more James uncovered, the more he realized that Emily's death wasn't just the result of one person's actions. It was the culmination of years of lies, betrayal, and emotional neglect. Emily had been the victim of a family that had been broken long before she ever stepped foot into those woods. The cracks in their foundation had been there all along, and they had finally shattered. As the investigation wore on, James began to feel the weight of the guilt pressing down on him. He wasn't just investigating a murder anymore, he was confronting the deep, painful truth about his own family. How could he look his mother in the eyes, knowing that she had been hiding something so vital? How could he continue to trust Daniel, the man who had been a father figure to him, when he now saw him as nothing more than a liar and a cheat? But what James didn't know was that the deeper he dug into his family's secrets, the closer he was getting to the truth about Emily's death. He had uncovered the fractures in the Carter family, but what he hadn't yet realized was that the person who had killed Emily was someone he had trusted his entire life, someone he never would have suspected. As James pieced together the pieces of the puzzle, one thing became increasingly clear: Emily's death had been no accident. It had been the result of a desperate need to protect secrets that, once revealed, could destroy everything. And the closer James got to the truth, the more dangerous the investigation became. His investigation into his mother's past, his own emotions, and the buried secrets of his family had led him to the inevitable conclusion: someone in his family had killed Emily. But who? Would the truth finally come to light, or would the Carter family be forever shattered by the darkness they had tried so hard to keep hidden? The tension was building, and James could feel it in every step he took, every lead he followed. But one thing was certain: the closer he got to the truth, the more he realized that uncovering it could cost him everything. Detective James Carter had spent weeks trying to untangle the knot of lies and deceit that had woven its way through his family. With every new lead, every new discovery, he felt the weight of the truth pressing down on him more and more. He had already uncovered painful truths about his mother's silence, his stepfather's affair, and the fractured relationships in the Carter household. But the hardest part of the investigation was yet to come. As James pored over Emily's personal belongings once more, something caught his eye. It wasn't a photograph or a letter this time. It was a small, leather-bound notebook hidden deep inside one of Emily's drawers. It had been there all along, but James had never thought to look inside. The moment he opened it, he knew this was the break he had been waiting for. Emily had written in it every day, filling it with her thoughts, her fears, and her discoveries. But what stood out to James were the last few entries, written just days before Emily's death. In her final entries, Emily detailed her suspicions about Daniel and his increasingly erratic behavior. She had witnessed more than just his secret meetings with Isabella Martinez. Emily had started to notice changes in Daniel, small things at first, like his constant checking of his phone, or the way he would become irritable at the mention of certain topics. She even described an evening when she had followed him to a cafe, only to see him meeting Isabella there, looking too comfortable, too relaxed, as though they shared something much more than just an affair. Emily's words hit James like a freight train. He had always known that there was tension in the family, but he never imagined that Daniel could be so careless. He had been so focused on the affair that he had overlooked the other signs: the jealousy, the anger, the desperation building inside Daniel as he tried to keep his double life from collapsing. But there was more. Emily's journal didn't just focus on the affair. There were mentions of something darker, something James hadn't even considered. Emily had written about an argument she overheard between Daniel and Isabella just days before her death. In the argument, Isabella had threatened to expose the affair, threatening to tear Daniel's life apart. Emily had been too far away to hear all of it, but the snippets she had caught were enough to give James a chilling feeling. It was clear now: Emily had been getting too close to the truth. She had discovered Daniel's greatest fear, that Isabella might ruin his carefully constructed life. As James continued to read, he felt a pit form in his stomach. Emily had been planning to confront Daniel, to tell him that she knew everything. But she hadn't yet decided how to approach him, unsure if she could bring herself to shatter her already fragile relationship with her mother. Emily had written about her fears of what might happen if Daniel found out that she knew the truth. And then, as if it were a premonition, she had written a final note in her journal. "I'm scared. I feel like someone's watching me. I'm not safe anymore. I don't know what to do." Those words sent a cold shiver down James's spine. Everything began to click into place. Emily's death wasn't a random act of violence. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong or a crime of passion from an outside source. No, this was personal. Emily had uncovered the one thing Daniel couldn't let anyone find out. And to protect his secrets, he had silenced her. Determined to find the final piece of the puzzle, James went through Daniel's personal belongings, hoping to find anything that might tie him to Emily's murder. He went through emails, phone records, and even checked his bank statements. That's when he found it. A series of encrypted text messages between Daniel and Isabella, messages that had been deleted from his phone but still remained in the phone company's records. James was able to access the deleted messages, and what he found was damning. The messages revealed that Daniel and Isabella had been planning to run away together, but their plans had changed after Emily started digging into their relationship. Daniel was desperate to keep his life intact, and that desperation was what ultimately led to Emily's death. In one of the messages, Daniel had written, "I can't let her ruin everything. I'll take care of it. She won't tell anyone." The pieces of the puzzle were now all but in place. James's heart raced as he pieced together the story in his mind. Emily had discovered Daniel's secret, and he had killed her to keep her quiet. The betrayal, the lies, and the secrets had led to one tragic outcome. His sister, the one person who had tried to protect their family from the truth, had been silenced forever. But there was still one question left. How could Daniel have been so careless? How could he have underestimated Emily? The more James thought about it, the clearer it became. Daniel had underestimated the power of Emily's determination. She wasn't just a frightened teenager, she was a young woman who was willing to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. And Daniel had paid the ultimate price for underestimating her. James knew that he had to act fast. The evidence was overwhelming. He couldn't let Daniel slip through his fingers now. But deep down, he also knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Once the truth was out, his family would be shattered forever. The price of uncovering the truth was steep, but James was willing to pay it. He had to bring justice for Emily. Detective James Carter sat at his desk, staring at the pile of evidence in front of him. Each piece seemed to lead him deeper into a labyrinth of lies and deceit. The more he uncovered, the more he realized how little he knew about the people closest to him. His investigation into the tragic death of his sister, Emily, had opened a floodgate of dark secrets, secrets that had been buried for years. But today, James felt like he was on the brink of discovering something that would change everything. After hours of poring over the text messages and journal entries, a crucial detail began to emerge. It wasn't just Daniel's affair with Isabella Martinez that was important, it was the fact that Daniel had been hiding much more than a simple relationship. As James carefully reviewed the messages between Daniel and Isabella, one particular exchange caught his attention. It was a message from Isabella, sent just days before Emily's death. "I can't do this anymore. If you don't leave her, I'll tell Amanda everything," the message read. James felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Isabella wasn't just angry, she was desperate. She had been threatening Daniel, warning him that if he didn't leave Amanda, she would reveal the affair to his wife. But there was more. Isabella's desperation had grown over the weeks, and the message continued, "We can't keep hiding this. You need to choose me. Or I'll ruin everything." The message was a bombshell. Emily had stumbled upon this secret, she had known about Daniel's affair with Isabella, and from the sound of it, she was planning to expose him. But what James hadn't realized until now was just how far Daniel had been willing to go to protect his perfect life. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. James's mind raced. The evidence was clear, Isabella had been pushing Daniel into a corner. Her threats had made him feel like there was no way out. And then, James thought back to the final entry in Emily's journal, the one she had written just days before her death. Emily had written about feeling watched, about sensing that someone knew she had discovered the truth. "I'm scared," she had written, "if I say something, it will destroy everything. But I can't keep quiet." James shivered as he realized the full weight of Emily's words. She had known something dangerous was coming, and she had feared for her life. Emily wasn't just trying to protect her family from the truth, she was trying to protect herself. The very same secret that had torn her family apart had ultimately cost her life. But it wasn't just Isabella's threats that made things more complicated. The deeper James dug, the more he began to understand that Daniel's motive wasn't just about keeping his affair hidden from Amanda. No, it was about controlling the narrative of his life, about maintaining his image as the perfect family man. Daniel's fear of losing everything had pushed him into a corner. And in that desperation, he had killed Emily to silence her forever. James's heart pounded in his chest. All the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. Emily had been killed because she had discovered the truth, and Daniel had been willing to go to any lengths to keep that secret buried. But there was still one last question lingering in James's mind: how had Daniel managed to cover his tracks so well? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that Daniel hadn't acted alone. Someone else had been involved. Someone who had helped him erase the evidence, someone who had been willing to do whatever it took to keep the truth hidden. And then, the final twist hit James like a bolt of lightning. As he reviewed the security footage from the night of Emily's death, something stood out. Daniel's car wasn't the only one seen leaving the house that night. A second car had been parked near the back of the house, and its movements were suspiciously timed with the events of that evening. The car belonged to none other than Amanda, his own mother. James felt a wave of nausea wash over him. His mother, Amanda, had been involved. She had known about the affair. She had known about the danger Emily was in, and yet she had kept silent. But why? What had Amanda been protecting all this time? Was she complicit in her daughter's death? James couldn't comprehend it. The shock of the realization was overwhelming. Amanda, his own mother, had been part of this twisted plan to keep the family's darkest secrets hidden. As the pieces of the puzzle finally came together, James felt a sense of dread settle in his chest. The truth was more horrifying than he could have ever imagined. Emily's death had been the result of a perfect storm, an affair, a desperate need to protect a perfect image, and a family too fractured to see the danger until it was too late. James had uncovered the truth, but at what cost? The family he had always known was a lie, and the people he had trusted the most were the ones who had betrayed him. The investigation was no longer just about finding a killer, it was about confronting the painful truth that the Carter family's perfect facade had been shattered. And in that destruction, Emily had lost her life. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, and Detective James Carter could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. For weeks, he had been digging through his family's past, searching for answers, and now, the truth was staring him in the face. The affair, the lies, the betrayal, it was all so much worse than he had ever imagined. But nothing had prepared him for the discovery that would change everything. It was late one evening when James, exhausted but determined, sat at his desk, going through the final set of security footage. He had seen the footage from the night of Emily's death countless times, but tonight, something caught his eye. A small detail, easily overlooked in the chaos of the investigation, now stood out like a red flag. There, on the video, was Robert Wilson's car. But it wasn't just the car's presence that sent a chill down James's spine, it was the timing. Robert had told James that he had been at the office late that night, working alone. But the security footage showed Robert's car leaving his office hours before he had claimed. It was a crucial lie, one that James now saw as the key to unlocking everything. James's heart raced as he rewound the footage. The timestamp on the video was precise, and it clearly showed Robert leaving his office and heading straight to the woods behind his house, the very woods where Emily's body had been found. The thought struck him like lightning: Robert was there the night Emily died. His alibi was a lie. It was at that moment that James realized how much had been hidden from him. Robert wasn't just a man trying to protect his image, he was a man desperate to keep his darkest secrets buried. And now, with this new evidence, everything was about to come crashing down. But the discovery didn't stop there. James's stomach dropped as he followed the trail of lies further. He accessed Robert's private emails, his phone records, and his financial accounts. Everything pointed to the same thing: Robert had been planning his escape. He had been siphoning large sums of money, preparing for a new life with his mistress, Elena Gonzalez, the woman who had been his affair partner for over a year. The emails were damning. Robert had been in constant communication with Elena, making plans for their future together, and even discussing how they would frame Amanda for the murder. He had calculated everything, down to the smallest detail. But in his pursuit of perfection, he had underestimated one thing: Emily. James sat in stunned silence as he read the final email. It was sent just days before Emily's murder. Robert had written, "I can't let her find out. She'll ruin everything. I'll take care of it, and we can finally be free." The realization hit James like a punch to the gut. Robert had killed Emily to protect his affair, to protect his family's image, and to preserve the life he had so carefully constructed. The truth was undeniable now. Robert Wilson, the man who had been the epitome of suburban success, the man everyone had trusted, was a cold-blooded murderer. And the worst part was that he had done it all to keep his double life intact. Emily had known the truth, and that truth had cost her everything. James knew he had to act fast. The weight of the evidence was clear, but confronting Robert wouldn't be easy. He had to bring his father-in-law in, make sure he was prepared to face the truth, and make sure justice was served. He couldn't let Robert's lies go unpunished, not after everything that had happened. The night was long, and the tension in the air was palpable. James's mind raced as he made the necessary calls, coordinating with his team to arrest Robert. His heart pounded in his chest as the truth became more and more undeniable. Robert had betrayed him, his family, and his sister, all for his own selfish desires. When the time came, James and his colleagues stormed Robert's office, arresting him without hesitation. Robert didn't put up a fight. His once confident demeanor had crumbled. As the officers cuffed him, he muttered a single sentence: "Please, don't tell Elena." James stood frozen, looking at the man who had once been a pillar of the community, now reduced to a broken man, pleading for mercy. The man who had so carefully built his life on lies, on deceit, was now nothing more than a shell of the person he had tried to portray. As Robert was led away in handcuffs, James felt a mix of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost was immense. The family he had once known was destroyed, and the man he had trusted like a father was a killer. He had sought the truth, but in doing so, he had lost his family forever. The case was closed, but the emotional scars would linger for a lifetime. The pain of betrayal, of seeing the people you love become strangers, was a price too high to pay. And yet, James knew that uncovering the truth was the only way to heal. The darkness had been exposed, and now, there was nothing left to hide. The courtroom was silent, a heavy air hanging over everyone present. James Carter stood at the back, watching as Robert Wilson, the man who had been his father figure for most of his life, was led to the stand. The truth had finally come to light. The lies, the betrayal, the murder, everything had been exposed. And yet, as James looked at Robert, a part of him still couldn't believe it. He had spent years seeing this man as a mentor, a protector. How could he have turned into someone capable of such a heinous act? James' heart pounded in his chest as the prosecutor read through the charges. First-degree murder. The brutal death of his sister, Emily, all to keep a secret hidden. Robert had confessed, but hearing the words spoken aloud made it feel more real, more painful. It was as if the courtroom walls were closing in on him, suffocating him with the reality of it all. His mind raced back to his childhood, the vacations, the family dinners, the times he had trusted Robert with everything. And now, all of it felt like a cruel lie. Robert's face was devoid of emotion, almost cold, as he sat there, listening to the evidence against him. He had no remorse, no apology for what he had done. He was simply a man who had been caught, who had finally run out of lies to tell. The truth was undeniable. Emily had discovered his affair. She had uncovered the secret he had worked so hard to keep hidden. And when she threatened to expose him, he had taken matters into his own hands. He had silenced her. And for what? To protect his perfect image, to preserve the life he had built with Amanda, to keep the lies intact. James couldn't help but feel a deep rage bubbling up inside him. The anger was raw, furious, burning him from the inside out. How could Robert have done this? How could he have taken Emily's life so easily? She had been just a teenager, innocent, full of potential, her life cut short by a man she had trusted. The thought made James' stomach turn. He wanted to scream at Robert, to make him feel the weight of what he had done. But there was no point. Robert had already shown his true colors, and no amount of anger could bring Emily back. As the verdict was read, James felt a strange emptiness wash over him. Robert was guilty. The law had done its job. But what about the rest? What about the devastation left in the wake of his actions? What about the broken family? His mother, Amanda, sat in the front row, her face pale, her eyes distant. She hadn't spoken much during the trial. James could see the guilt in her eyes, the shame she carried. She knew. She had known about the affair, about the danger Emily was in. But she had stayed silent. And now, Emily was gone. How could she ever forgive herself for not protecting her daughter? James turned his attention back to the courtroom. The judge had spoken. Robert Wilson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the finality of the sentence didn't bring James peace. The justice that had been served felt hollow, empty. He had gotten the man responsible for his sister's death off the streets, but what did that really change? His family was shattered. Emily was still gone. And nothing, not even the harshest punishment, could undo the pain they had all endured. As James left the courtroom, he felt a weight settle on his shoulders. The truth had come out, but at what cost? His family, once whole, was now broken beyond repair. His relationship with Amanda would never be the same. How could it be? There was no going back from this. The lies had been too deep, the betrayal too great. But as he walked through the courthouse doors, James felt a flicker of something else, something small, something he hadn't expected: relief. It wasn't the kind of relief he had imagined, not the kind that would fix everything. But it was a relief nonetheless. The truth had finally been exposed. Robert would never be able to hurt anyone again. And Emily, in some small way, had finally gotten justice. But the pain, the guilt, the anger, it would always be there. It would never fully go away. And that was the hardest part. James knew that the road to healing would be long. His family had been shattered, and it wasn't just Robert's actions that had caused the destruction. It was the years of secrets, of lies, of missed chances to confront the truth. And now, they all had to live with the consequences. What could have been different? What if someone had spoken up sooner? What if Emily had confronted Robert earlier, before it was too late? What if Amanda had stood up for her daughter, instead of staying silent? These questions would haunt James forever. As he walked away from the courthouse, the sun setting behind him, James couldn't help but wonder, how many other families were out there, hiding their own dark secrets? How many lives would be destroyed by the lies people chose to live with? And most importantly, how long could anyone keep running from the truth before it caught up with them? This story is a painful reminder that the truth is not something that can be hidden forever. It has a way of coming to light, no matter how hard people try to keep it buried. And when it does, the consequences are often far worse than anyone ever imagined. What do you think about the decisions made by the characters in this story? How would you have handled the situation? Could things have turned out differently if someone had spoken up sooner? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation.